Just want to make sure you can hear me. Okay, I'm not muted.
Mhm.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all today. I really appreciate this opportunity to work with our locally elected officials who are doing some really incredible, supportive efforts and putting a lot of your energy and time into making DC what it is. And I know it's a very difficult job sometimes, and I know it can be thankless, and I know you're volunteering your energy and time. And I just want to thank you all for doing what you do to help to support our city and all the work and energy you put into that. So my name is Leanne. Thank you for that introduction, Gail. I'm here to present to you today some information on ways that we can resolve conflict or transform conflict. And I don't know if you read the intro or the few paragraphs that were sent around describing this training, but ultimately the gist of it was that conflict is a natural process that we experience in groups of people. It's whenever individuals come together with their own needs and their own interests and their own concerns, there's going to be conflict that arises. And conflict is actually, we should invite conflict, healthy conflict, into group dynamics because it allows people to present their authentic selves and stand up for what they believe in and present their needs. And when we allow those authentic aspects of ourselves to be presented to the world, then we can start to incorporate them in the systems that we're a part of. So often I find in my life, in my work, that I myself and the people around me, they don't stand up for what they believe in, and oftentimes they don't even know what needs that they have. And so for us to be able to connect with our needs and realize them and then be able to share them with the world in the way that is respectful and kind allows us to come to a place of resolution and growth and development from those conflicts. So before we begin, I'd like to just present the agenda for today. We've got about an hour and 45, 50 minutes left left together. And I'd like to go through an introduction to nonviolent communication, which is a really powerful tool that allows us to connect with ourselves, connect with the world around us, present the things that we need to the world around us in a way that is really respectful and kind and empathetic. And it can support resolutions of conflict and restore relationships. It's an extremely powerful tool, and it also allows us to get more deeply connected and have a better understanding of what it is that we need and want in this world and what's motivating us to behave in the way that we behave and to do the things that we do. After that, we're going to go through a very simple, basic comparison between destructive and constructive conflict. So what are some aspects of a constructive conflict and how we work through conflicts constructively versus what breaks down relationships when there's a conflict that arises? What are some of the things that actually cause the further destruction of those relationships and those collaborations? Then we're going to go into some explanation of how bias leads to bias and prejudice and power dynamics can lead to conflict. And then we're going to talk about how we can effectively create systematic change and do that when there's uneven power dynamics at play. And last but not least, we're going to talk about accountability and how that relates to blame and how we can work towards accountability and away from blame, because really a lot of this work has to do with identifying the judgments that we have and being aware of them and using that information to have deeper insight around how it's affecting the way that we treat each other, the way that we behave. And then last but not least, I have some concluding remarks and recommendations. So I want to just set a couple of ground rules for the space or expectations for the group. And please do use the chat or ask, unmute yourself and add to this. But just a few things. One is simply that we try to respect each other in this space as much as possible, listen attentively to each other and compassionately, and we don't speak about any of the anything that goes on with respect to the dialogue where people are expressing personal parts of themselves. So try to keep those things confidential. Does anyone else have any suggestions on how we can hold this space together so it feels a little bit more supportive? Okay. If anything comes up for you, please do speak up. And then last but not least, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is respecting yourself, respecting your needs, being aware of them. So please do what you need to do as we go through this training. If you need a biology break, if you need to walk the dog, please stay connected as much as you can. If you can be on camera during the discussions, that's really useful for connection. But first and foremost, listen to your body and what it needs. And the purpose of this talk is to provide our DC locally elected officials with some information around these topics that we're going to be discussing. So if at any time you bring, you want to bring your insights, your knowledge, your wisdom to the table and interrupt me, ask questions, contribute to the conversation, please do so. You're invited to, and I would urge you to, because your knowledge around these things is relevant, and maybe even more relevant than mine, since you're the ones that are working within these systems that I'm trying to help support you with some tools. So bringing your insights from your experience is going to be very valuable to the discussion and conversation. Okay, so first and foremost, before we get started, I'd just like to invite the people that are here with us today to take a moment to ground into the space and center. So you can place the soles of your feet on the ground, your sit bones in the chair, the crown of the head reaches to the sky, and just take a few deep breaths here, just bringing yourself present into the space. Take a nice deep inhalation and slowly release it. Take around 3 or 4 breaths. Deep breath in, feel the expansion of the rib cage with the lungs. Notice a grounding sensation with the exhalation. Deep breath in. Notice how you're connected with the room, with the space that you're in. Maybe feel the air on your skin. One more deep breath in. Feel the lengthening of the spine. And as you exhale, try to just imagine you're relaxing a little bit. Okay. All right, so to get us started, I'm going to talk about nonviolent communication, which is a school of thought that I study pretty closely and practicing very frequently and regularly. And nonviolent communication was developed by Marshall Rosenberg in the 70s. There's a whole school of thought that supports it. There's the Center for Nonviolent Communication, and there are various groups working all around the world to bring this into the mainstream. And what it is an opportunity for us to understand ourselves more fully, provide us with a greater sense of a healthy power of choice in our lives, allows us to have clear understanding of what our needs are and how we can communicate that with other people under potentially conflicting situations. So everything that we do in life involves us relying on our environment or our resources around us, relationship with other people. And each of these things are considered or could be considered a collaboration. And sometimes in our life experiences, we come into conflict, whether that's internally, where we're internally struggling with decision making around something, or We want to argue with someone, but we didn't have the nerve to speak up about it. Or externally, where we're in interpersonal conflict or interpersonal relationship with others, and we have, a disagreement about being able to meet our needs. And every conflict expert around the world would agree that all conflicts stem from either an unmet need that we have, or the threat or the perceived threat of a need being unfulfilled. So when we go into these conflicting situations, or when there's an argument or conflict that arises, it's because we fear we're not going to be able to meet our needs. There's a whole school of thought called humanistic psychology that was developed by Alex Wood. And this school says that true happiness stems from our ability to be our authentic selves. So that means that we can behave the way that we want to behave. We don't always behave in the way that we want to behave, right? Sometimes our emotions get the best of us and we act out of line or out of alignment with the person that we'd like to be. And so trying to find a way to get to behaving in the way that we want to be so that we can find this true happiness under conflict situations can be supported by using the nonviolent communication framework. So without further ado, let's dive into what NVC, or compassionate nonviolent communication is. So this is a slide that presents the 4 main pillars of nonviolent communication. Underneath, or the base of this compassionate nonviolent communication, is the understanding that we're going to be able to self-regulate our emotions so that we're in alignment with the person that we want to be. And so we're going to talk about self-soothing techniques and tools that we can use to help to support us being able to be calm and at ease and not overwhelmed by our emotions. But as we understand that that's the foundation for this framework, there are 4 main components of the nonviolent communication framework, and I'm going to go through them now. So the first is observations. We have observations that we make when we're trying to pursue a more deep and clear understanding of our experience. And these observations are kind of the thinking part of this process. It incorporates what our understanding of the situation was, and we also want to try to name the stories, the judgments, the interpretations, and the beliefs that we're holding. And so a big part of this work is realizing that our observation could vary from other people's observations of and their experience. So by acknowledging the judgments, the social, cultural, personal, and systematic biases, the assumptions that we make, and the limited perspective that we may have, allow us to move from an evaluated understanding or an interpretation of the situation into something that's more objectively an observation. And so we're not asking, with the NVC framework, we're not asking for anyone to remove their judgments, to not be biased, to not make assumptions, but rather being aware of them and understanding how those things are influencing the way that we understand the world or that experience. So when I am looking through the observation lens, I see how all of these things distort my view. But when I am evaluating, I don't realize the judgments, the accusations, and the assumptions that I'm making. And so when we evaluate, an example would be someone saying to you, why are you ignoring me? And that includes an assumption of the other person's intention. But rather than jumping to conclusions about what their intentions are about us, we can uncover that observation by removing that assumption. And instead, we can say to that person, you're not showing me any indication that you're hearing what I'm saying. And so when you take those two ways of interacting with another and pointing out this observation or acknowledgement of the situation, we put ourselves in a position by indicating that we hear, by indicating we acknowledge the assumption that we're making, we're not pointing our fingers and blaming or shaming them. But instead, we're taking responsibility and we're clearly expressing or explaining what was happening in that situation without any judgment. And that is a first and very strong step towards building a bridge between you and someone else, especially if there's a conflict that's involved. So get to the observation and try to remove all of the interpretations that are a part of that experience. And it's a human experience. So we are bound to do those things, make those judgments, jump to conclusions, make assumptions. Those are natural, but we want to be able to be aware of them and we want to peel them away if we can. So the second pillar of nonviolent communication are the feelings, the emotions, right? We don't necessarily talk about our emotions very frequently when we're in a professional setting. We don't necessarily need to talk about those emotions. But what we could do instead is be connected with them. And when we connect with our emotions in the behavioral science community, we say when we feel it, we heal it, and when we name it, we tame it. And so if we can connect with the emotions that we're experiencing, even if we don't express them, it'll allow us to gain control of ourselves, be in alignment with that person that we want to be, and not be overwhelmed by those emotions. And so finding the self-soothing techniques that we're going to talk about shortly are key to being able to be in control of our emotions. But connecting with our emotions is a really important part of this process too. And it really helps us to heal if we are in a place where we feel like we've been harmed or we're hurt. So this is a simple glossary of terms that we use. It's not complete, but it is extensive. And these are physical sensations. So we want to be aware of the physical feelings and connect with them. The somatic experience is an indication to us that there's something going on. When we have a physical sensation that is something that is trying to alert us of harm, or that we need to protect ourselves and find safety, we have things like our heart starts to beat really quickly, or we start to sweat, or our muscles start to tense up. These are all indications that there's something happening where we fear we're not going to be able to meet our needs. And so by connecting with these physical feelings, we can start to address them. We also have the emotions that I was talking about earlier. The emotions are a big part of this too. A lot of times the physical sensations are the first things that come up. Our thought process is even slower than the emotions and the physical sensations, right? We don't realize what's happening, but we start to defend ourselves, protect ourselves, because we're in that place of insecurity or trying to survival mode. And so if we can connect with the emotions, then it's really powerful for us to be able to move through them. This is a glossary of terms that is in the format of a feelings wheel developed by Gloria Wilcox in the 70s. And this is just a, language that we use to try to connect with those experiences. In the center of the circle, we have the very basic emotions that most everybody can relate to, right? But as we move out of the circle, out of the wheel, we start to get deeper and deeper into a refined understanding of what those emotions actually feel like, or how we can connect with them more deeply. I know Brené Brown in her most recent book was talking about most humans, or at least the ones that she surveyed, had a vocabulary of about 6 to 8 words that they use to describe their emotions. But as you can see here, there are numerous other words that we can use. And as we refine our understanding of what we're experiencing, we can use these words to help to support that. And we can also share that with others to communicate a more clear explanation of what we're experiencing. So the feelings, the second pillar, and this is not in any particular order. Like I said, the feelings are sometimes the first thing that pop up when we're in a place where we fear our needs aren't going to be met. The feelings can indicate to us what needs that we're yearning to meet. They can also indicate to us the other end of the spectrum when we're actually fulfilling our needs and our body and our emotions, our physical body and our emotions are telling us, hey, pay attention. There's something that's good happening right now and you're fulfilling your well-being. You're doing something that supports your well-being. And figure out what that is, because we want you to bring more of that into your life. Your physical body wants you, your emotional body, yourself wants you to bring more of that into your life. So it's causing all of these alarms to go off to say, hey, what needs are there? What's underlying what you're doing right now that can help to either support you, or what do you want to pay attention to so that when the situation arises in the future, you can be aware of the needs that aren't being met and try to incorporate them. So we move from observations, which is the thinking part of the process, to the heart center, which is the feeling part of the process, down to the solar plexus, or the core, or the belly, which is our needs. And again, well, this is a glossary of terms that is in the shape of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? All of this is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which was determined through his book on a theory of human motivation. And ultimately what he said, and which many other research scientists have agreed to, is that philosophers have agreed to, is that humans have these needs. These are all needs that we can all relate to, and at one point or another, we're going to have to meet those needs. We don't necessarily prioritize them the same way. Maslow's hierarchy, or this pyramid, has actually been debunked recently with some research that proves that humans actually have a greater need for a higher need for belonging and intimacy and connection. And Gabor Mate, who is a current research scientist and behavioral scientist and psychologist, he talks about how connection or belonging and our need for are the most important needs that we have, and that we're motivated to connect as human beings, as mammals, because we are reliant on each other for support, right? We're altruistic beings. From the ages of 0 till who knows at this time, how old do you have to be before you start taking care of yourself? You know, some people, even as adults, have a difficult time doing that. So because we're relying on each other, we have some expectation, or we have the most important need of all, is the need for connection, the need to want to support each other. We wouldn't give our resources away, our food, our water, our money. We wouldn't give those things away to someone unless we were receiving something back. And what we receive back is that connection, that intimacy, that being part of something bigger than ourselves. And Maslow also said that, you know, unless we are able to meet these lower needs, the basic needs and the psychological needs, that we wouldn't get to this place of self-fulfillment, or creativity, self-actualization, our full potential, and, you know, true happiness. So again, another glossary of terms, just language that we can use. These are symbols that when we share them with other people, they can relate to them because there's a definition that we, you know, shared understanding that we have about what this means. When we're talking about expressing our feelings and our needs, it doesn't always have to be with words. One of the reasons why art is so powerful is because it allows the artist to express their emotions and their needs, and it allows the person who's interpreting those to be able to see it in a different way. And so it's an exchange of expression and reception of feelings, emotions. You know, interpretive dance is another example. Like, how do we express our emotions? How do we communicate our needs? How do we connect with our needs? As we're discussing the feelings and the needs, it's important to differentiate them from what we call in the nonviolent communication community our faux feelings and our faux needs. And these are things that include a reliance or codependency or dependency on other people, right? They include other people. They include assumptions about what the other people are intending. They include expectations around certain materialistic things. And we want to move away from relying on materialistic things or resources or individuals to be able to meet our needs and to be able to connect with our feelings. So we want to dig into those faux feelings and needs to understand what's beneath them that don't involve anyone other than ourselves. And so, for example, when I'm feeling like I'm being, say, for example, being treated in a way that, say, I feel like someone is rejecting me. Underneath of that rejection, I could connect with the feelings of being, feeling lonely and feeling isolated. And I could connect with the feeling of feeling sad. And then I can also connect with the needs that are part of that faux feeling of rejection, which could be a need for acknowledgement or a need for contribution or a need for connection or collaboration. When we move past the faux feelings and dig into them to understand the feelings and when we move past the faux feelings and needs and we dig into them and we realize the feelings and needs that aren't having to do with anyone other than ourselves, then it allows us to become independent in the strategies that we use to be able to meet them. It frees us from codependency on anyone else other than ourselves changing their behavior or us having to have certain particular resources or material things. And it allows us to be more creative and expansive in our understanding of what's possible and how to meet those needs moving forward. And last but not least, for the 4 pillars of nonviolent communication, we have our requests. And this is where we present everything that we've learned about our experience to the world, right? We've got to the clear understanding of our observation of the situation, trying to peel back the judgments, the assumptions, the accusations, the beliefs that we're holding, the stories that we tell ourselves. We've connected with our emotions and the physical sensations that are trying to take control of us so that we can't behave in alignment with the person that we want to behave like, our true self. We've connected with the needs that we have. We've maybe even incorporated an analysis or an assessment of what needs the others have, right? This will empower us to be in a position where when we go into these negotiations, these conversations, trying to restore or transform these relationships, we're clear about why they're upset. Why are they triggered by the situation? Because their needs aren't being met, or they fear their needs aren't going to be met. What are those needs? Can you connect with them? Can you bring them to the table and say, I wonder if you're needing this? If you can do that, it'll empower you. It puts you in a place of knowing they see you as being compassionate and wanting to understand. And it can really help to bridge that disconnection between you and the others. So acknowledging the needs and bring that with you to the table when you go to make those requests. So this is where we go out into the world and connect with the other people. And we maybe we don't connect with anyone other than ourselves. We can make requests of ourselves, right? A lot of times this work is about being able to say to myself, all right, well, this is what I'm going to do in the future so that I can meet my need. And that's it. I don't need to talk to anyone about this at all. One of the reasons why it's difficult to go into those conversations asking other people to change the way that they're doing things is because it's hard to change behavior in the first place. And unless you can really get them to invest in that change, which requires a lot of persuasion, which we're going to work on, we're going to talk about. But if we can be persuasive and convince them to change, they might not even be able to do so, right? So it's really important for us to be able to be in a position where we have a variety of different strategies that we're going to use to address those needs that we want to fulfill. And some of those strategies don't involve anyone else changing their behavior other than ourselves. When we make a request of ourselves or of other people, an appealing request involves, being present and focused on what's going to happen in the future, not dwelling on the grievances in the past. An appealing request involves us offering a positive action. Rather than what we don't want to see, we talk about what we want to see and what could be done. An appealing request is flexible. Truly, a true request is not a demand, right? We're willing to accept a no. So we have to understand that that no is actually an opportunity for further conversation, because that no indicates, when someone says no to the request that we make, it indicates that there's something that we're not paying enough attention to. There's a need that still wants to be met. The offer that you're making them is not incorporating all of the needs that they have. That's why they're saying no. An appealing request is specific, so we want to be really concrete about what that request is. Instead of saying, I would really like you, I would like to talk. That's a nice request, but it's not clear. It's not precise. It's not specific. It's pretty vague. But instead, you could say, can we find a time to sit down and talk about things? Do you have some time on Tuesday? Or maybe you can let me know of your schedule next week. So really getting to the nitty-gritty of the details, so you can put that down and be like, all right, we've decided on this. I'm going to write it down. I can quantify it. I can measure it. I can say whether or not it was done. And when we're able to say whether or not it was done, then we can go back later and say whether or not it was effective. Was that request effective? Because understanding a no is possible means that they don't have to necessarily just say no for that to be a no, right? For them not to be able to be interested in cooperating with the request that we make. It could mean, a no could mean that they just aren't able to follow through with it, or maybe they're, just not able to do it at this time. Maybe they tried and they're doing it terribly. But these are all different forms of no, right? Because they weren't able to actually follow through with the thing that you asked them to do. So we want to be able to be open to that no and realize that that no isn't shutting down the conversation in all cases. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes we're just not thinking enough about what the other person needs. As we're going through this process, trying to get to a request, I want the caveat or, condition to be that this is not an oppressive system where we're forcing people to do what we want them to do. Instead, we want to motivate out of willingness and compassion of giving. We want them to feel like they're excited to participate in us being able to meet our needs. We can collaborate to meet our needs together. So we don't want this request to be, or their ability to meet this request to be out of fear, out of guilt or shame or obligation. We want them to be excited and motivated to support us. Sometimes demands are necessary, right? Sometimes we have to make demands because it's an important part of our system, whether it's a hierarchical system or we're making setting expectations for groups, or whether it's an emergency situation where things have to be, realized and dealt with very quickly. But sometimes there are, and oftentimes there are, opportunities for us to work together in collaboration with the freedom to choose on whether or not we want to collaborate. So allow the no's and be prepared for the no's. And one way to prepare well for those no's is, for someone saying no to the request that you make, is by having a variety of alternative requests in your back pocket. So for example, if a friend of mine who was always late is going to meet me at the coffee shop at 3 p.m., and I know she's always late and I really don't have time to wait around tomorrow, I could ask her, hey, friend, would you mind being on time tomorrow? Because I know that sometimes we lose track of time, but I have a really busy agenda tomorrow, so it's important for us to be able to meet when we say we're going to meet because I'm only going to have about an hour. She could say no to that. She could say no, or she could also just not show up on time. We can consider the fact that she's always late and it's difficult for her to be on time. And instead, we can postulate a request that asks if she could do something else that's more appropriate for her, considering the way that she, typically behaves. And so I could say, hey, friend, I know that we're meeting for coffee tomorrow at 3, and it's really important that we're on time because I only have about an hour and I really want to spend that whole time with you. So I'm wondering if you're going to be late, could you text me and let me know so I'm not sitting around waiting for you? Or that's dwelling on the grievances. So caveat, take that out of there instead of saying I'm not waiting, so that I'm not waiting for you, so that we can share, get the most out of our time together. And so that's a very appealing, clear request with the understanding that your need for timeliness, your need for respect of your time or acknowledgement of your busy schedule could be met with simply by preparing yourself for it in advance. And last but not least, have some requests independent of the others that don't involve them having to change themselves at all and will still allow you to be able to meet your need and stay in relationship with those people. So for the friend that is always late that forgot to text, what do? I accept her or him and I say this is part of their situation and I would rather than scheduling a coffee meet with them on a busy day, I want to schedule it on a day that I don't have a lot going on. I want to be considerate of the fact that, accepting of the fact that that's the way that they behave. And I want to acknowledge that and respect their needs, whatever they are beneath it. And say, you know what, we can still meet for coffee. I know you're probably going to be late. I'm just going to bring a book and I'll sit there and wait for you. Because I value our time together so much, I'm willing to compromise or support you in that way. So now I just like to talk about these self-soothing techniques, self-regulating tools, and I'd love it if anyone who's online would like to participate and just share some of the things that you do to support you when you're overwhelmed by emotions or even when your physical body is kind of pointing to the fact that you have some needs that you're afraid that you aren't going to be able to meet. So what are some of the self-regulating techniques that you use? Anyone, feel free to put it in the chat.
You should be able to unmute yourselves as well. Everyone has the power to do that themselves on their computer if they'd like to actually verbalize it.
Thanks, Gail.
So I think we have some information in the chat.
Wonderful. Okay, so, and this is from Commissioner Kensek. Thank you. This was actually a comment based on what we were talking about a minute ago about the friend being late, and they recommend tell the individual that you're meeting 30 minutes before the actual email. Then your friend will be on time. So you mean the meeting before 30 minutes before the actual meeting, so that when they're 30 minutes late, they're actually on time. I think that's what you mean. Is that right? I think so. Okay. So for the self-regulating techniques, self-soothing techniques that we use, there's a variety of different things we can do, right? Simply breathing deeply stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system through the vagus nerve and causes a biophysical response that changes the chemicals in the body and relaxes the body. So just breathing deeply, expanding the diaphragm, expanding the rib cage with the lungs, you can soothe yourself very quickly. And that's something that you can do anywhere and everywhere. A big part of this work is not only connecting with certain, tools that work for you, but knowing which tools work for you in different situations, right? I like to meditate. I try to meditate every day for at least 10 to 15 minutes. I don't necessarily, oh, it looks like, Gail, it looks like they're not able to unmute themselves.
Okay, I will figure out, and you keep going and I'll figure that out.
Okay. So when we're trying to figure out which tools work best for us, we need to identify the tools that work for us under different situations. So the meditation won't work if I'm in the middle of a board meeting and somebody's yelling at me, right? That's not going to help me calm down. But I could instead take those 3 deep breaths, say, you know, excuse me for a second, I need to use the ladies' room, run and take a biology break, do the breathing there, maybe take a moment to like close the eyes and calm down. But we have an opportunity in those situations to pick and choose. We need to be aware of the situation and how each of these tools that we use is situational. Did anybody want to share? Now that I think that you have the access to unmute yourself, does anybody want to share self-soothing techniques that you use?
Yes,
Yep.
sure. You can hear me. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that some techniques I use, honestly, is just trying to, as you mentioned, take a walk around, get a little fresh air, or even drink plenty of water, because sometimes situations can be very difficult when you're working with difficult people.
Absolutely. And, you know, like trying to steer away from that judgment of people being difficult, maybe it's just they have needs that are like oftentimes conflicting with yours, right? Or their personality type doesn't jive well with yours.
Very true. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to teach you the havening technique, which is developed by 2 research scientists working in PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and they found that some simple ways to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system that actually reduce the response or the reactiveness of PTSD patients dramatically. One is called, they're all called havening, but one is where we simply put the palms of the hands together and we move the palms of the hands from the fingertips, from the base of the palm up, and then vice versa. The other hand, fingertips to the base of the palm, back and forth with a deep breath in. And I don't know if you're doing this now, but I invite you to try it. And I want you to see if you can tell I have goosebumps already, simply like that quickly. My body is starting to self-regulate. Thank you, Kathy. Yoga and Tai Chi, yes, definitely. And these are moving types of meditation, right? These are ways to quiet the mind. We want to be able to calm the mind. We want to be able to connect with the body. And that's what these yoga and Tai Chi allow us to do. There's also another form of havening where we take the fingertips from the temple in between the eyebrows and from the in between the eyebrows and move them out to the temple and just rub very deeply. So if we're sitting at our desk in our office and we're having like maybe we're on a Zoom call or WebEx call and we can just turn our camera off for a second and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this guy, right? Like, just rub the eyebrows, rub over top the eyebrows. And this is another havening technique that could really very quickly stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. The third havening technique is where we take our hands from our elbows up to the shoulders and just rubbing them back and forth, going one stride up with the breath inhalation, one stride down with the exhalation, back and forth with the breath. Deep breath in. And so these three types of havening have been proven to be incredibly powerful to help support us when we're overwhelmed. I love what was said earlier about going out into nature, right? Nature, connecting with nature, being present with a lot of other living things that are all energy, you know, moving and sounds and light. That really helps us to ground us to become present in that moment. When that happens, then those thoughts, those worries, those, you know, fear, those 4Fs or survival mode, fight, flight, flee, or freeze, those things start to dissolve. We no longer, when we're in nature, we no longer feel like our safety. When we connect with the nature too, we have to make sure we're connected with the nature. When we connect with the nature, we no longer feel like we're we're going to be overrun by our emotions. And when I say connect with nature, I mean, when you're walking, you don't have your face down on your phone and you're not streaming through your email, right? We're really being present there in the moment. So there's a lot of different things we can do. Aromatherapy is really powerful because it supports, it goes straight to the brain, right? Connects with the amygdala right through the nostrils to the brain. And so it's like immediacy when you're talking about trying to self-soothe. There's a lot of different things we can do. So find your tools, find what helps to support you when you're self-regulating, find what works in different situations, and use that to support you when you're overwhelmed, like even like having tokens around you or things, right? Like I received this a long time ago. It's a quartz shaped as an angel, and it reminds me of my grandmother. Whenever I see that, it's on my desk, I think of Grace. I immediately think of my grandmother's Grace. And when I connect with that, I start to bring that into my present moment. Okay. I'm just going to go back to where we were in the slides. All right, so as we attempt to resolve or transform these conflicts that we're in, or situations that are kind of overwhelming, or maybe when somebody else is kind of overwhelmed, right? Like it's our job or it's your job as leaders and representatives to take kind of a position of like support, right? So when the constituents are acting out, when someone is overly dramatic and also sitting across from you at that committee table, how do we help to support them? How can we help to bring them back so that they're behaving in a way that they're going to be proud of? And one of the ways we can do that is by really listening to the others that are upset, actively supporting them by listening to what they're saying, and not, that doesn't mean that we're giving them advice. That doesn't mean that we're telling them about how we can relate to what they're going through. It doesn't mean that we're commiserating on what, how troubled or terrible their situation is, or consoling them. Because all of these things actually don't work to help support the person that's under stress. They actually take the attention off of the individuals that we're trying to support and are deflective and not supportive at all. So moving away from giving advice and storytelling and moving into these kinds of active listening skills that are listed here in this diagram. Being attentive, right? Using your body language to show that. Eye contact, but open body language, arms down, not like across your body, not like drawn out like you're going to fight, but rather arms are relaxed, body is relaxed. You're directing your body towards them. You're using your eyes to show them that you're there and you're present with them. You're listening, you're actually listening, and we're not listening to fix the problem, right? We're listening just to show support of what they're going through. So we want to ask them questions so that we can find clarity, and they may even find clarity from those questions, right? Ask them open-ended questions about what was going on for them. Ask them probing questions about what was happening for them so that they can have a deeper understanding of what was going on. Request clarification with those questions. Paraphrase what you're hearing. So you're showing them that you're listening. You're showing them that you can summarize what they've told you. And then you're also showing them or helping them as being a mirror of reflection of what it is they're presenting to you, which can allow them another layer of processing of what it is that they're trying to process. So being aware of what they're experiencing, showing them with their body language that you're attentive, being attentive by asking a lot of questions for clarification, paraphrasing what they've said, and then summarizing what they've said, and then being attuned and reflecting the feelings that they're showing. So if someone is sad and upset, you don't want to be like super excited and overwhelming. You want to kind of reflect, sit with them in their emotions, sit with them in their situation. So reflecting the body language that they're showing you can be really powerful to show support, to show the person who is under stress that you're there with them, present with them, and you can see how what they're experiencing is affecting them. And as we go through this, considering the verbal responses and the nonverbal, right? And the verbal incorporating not only the words, but also the tone and the speed and the volume of the way that we say things, right? There's so much that we communicate that are outside of language that we need to be aware of as we're trying to be there present with other people. So now I'd like to go into a short exercise. And Gail, I wonder, do we have an opportunity to go into small groups with the WebEx? I don't think we do we?
We do have breakout session ability. However, Leanne, we have a small group today, so I don't know that we necessarily need to break out.
We can work here. That's totally
We
okay.
still work here. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Good.
you know, and my colleague Kathy Williams is on, so we can add to the group. That would make us 7, or if you want to just work with the 5 attendees, it's up to you.
Well, it's more of each individual being able to present their experience. And I'm wondering what we could do actually before we go and decide one or the other. Can I ask anyone who is going to go into this exercise with us, who's interested in exercising with us, if they could just turn their cameras on for a moment? And then we can see if they're going to be actively participating. And if that's not something that they're interested in doing or they're not able to do presently, then we can just go through the exercise as a larger group. How does that sound, Gail?
That sounds fine. That sounds fine. I'm hearing that they can't turn their cameras on. Let me see. They should. Everyone should be. Well, let me do this. I think I can. They should have muting abilities themselves. And so everyone now
Hey,
can.
Gail.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Alan Kennedy. Just so you know, before I actually shut mine off, just so you didn't hear any background noise, but when I did that, it locked me out. So it's like right now you have us all able to speak, but if we try to like shut it off, it'll then permanently lock it again, and then you have to do the thing where you re-unlock it. So that's why I think others are probably either not saying anything or not locked because the microphone, like it's recorded. It's basically they can hear all of us as we're talking. Like anyone can interrupt at any time. So, you know, but yeah, right now mine is working. I'm sure the others is working as well. But if I try to mute mine right now, it'll stay muted until you unmute me.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. So, I'm just, I think, Leanne, just to keep this stuff moving, I've got everyone. I can unmute them. I think we're going to, instead of putting their camera on, I can't figure out.
Oh, here, I can, Gail, let me see something. Hold on one second. Let me see.
So I have everyone unmuted and I don't understand because it also says that everyone is unmuted.
If you go to the top participant,
Mm-hmm.
then you should be able to see the allow panelists to unmute themselves is checked.
Yep, everyone, and anyone can share is checked. So I had, I've checked unmute.
But that's allow panelists, not participants.
Well,
Not
everyone was entered the ability to when I set it up to share. So
We can chat now. We can definitely all chat. You did the right thing, Gil. I made the mistake by pressing it to like shut it down after I spoke last. That's why mine became muted again. But I think if everyone just leaves it on not muted, it'll be fine for the rest of the call.
okay, all right. Well, we'll have to work on just audio, Leanne.
Oh no, it's totally cool. Okay, so let's I wonder if anyone has, let me pull that slide back up so we can go into the exercise. And then if anybody has an example that they'd like to use, that will be wonderful. If not, then we can. Okay, so this exercise is applying what we just talked about, right? The nonviolent communication framework. The first pillar, observations. The second pillar is feelings. The third pillar is needs, and then the requests. And so with this exercise, we want to try to apply some situation that we've been in recently where we've experienced a conflict. It could be an internal conflict, right? It could have been a situation where we didn't actually get into conflict with someone else, but we were upset by it, right? But if it's with someone else, that'll allow a little bit more discourse, and then we can get to the requests part involving other people, which can be a little bit more interesting. But think about a time, and we'll just work independently for a moment. Think about a time where you recently got into a conflict with either internally or with someone else. And it could be in your personal life, it could be in your work life. And I want you to try to remember that situation. I want you to maybe close your eyes and take yourself back there in your memory. And just notice what you were experiencing at that moment. Try to feel into the body. See if there's any physical sensations that come up for you. Try to notice any of the emotions that were alive in you at that time. And then think about the experience itself and try to understand how the observation lens could have been discolored or more, kind of bended or blended, or so it wasn't a clear picture of what was happening. And that will be because of your judgments, your assumptions, your accusations, your insecurities, your trauma. And just write down, if you can, what were some of the feelings that came up? And what were some of the needs that you noticed that you may have been craving for? I'm going to go to a slide that has a glossary of terms of the needs. So what were the needs that were underneath that conflict or that upset? I'm just going to take another 2 minutes and then open up the conversation.
It's just mine or yours? That's yours. Couldn't find any good.
Okay, does somebody want to share? Does anybody have an experience they'd like to work on together? And again, if you could keep it confidential, so don't use any names. That would be helpful.
Am I unmuted, Leanne?
I can hear you.
You can hear me. Good evening to everyone. It's very interesting that you asked this question as we're still in the throes of this. I own a condominium, and we have a condominium association. So that should tell anyone who's involved with that there's conflict at all times. Most recently, to avoid to avoid a very high increase in the condo fees, a member of the board declared that another member of the board was stealing money, which was why we needed the money, and that in order to uncover the wrongdoing, we had to have an audit, which, as most persons who are familiar with this know, an audit is not the purpose of an audit is not to uncover wrongdoing. So deflect the need for an increase in condo fees, it was thought by performing this audit, which is required by our bylaws but not necessary at this time, that we wouldn't need to raise the condo fees. That is an ongoing conflict right now with a very, very intelligent person who declared that she single-handedly was going to use the reserves monies to provide an audit, and reserve monies are not used for that. So that's a conflict.
Well, that's the observation of the experience, right? That's
Yes.
your
Yes,
perspective
it
what's
is.
happening.
Yes, it is.
Awesome.
That's
And
my perspective. Yes, it is.
yeah, and so do you see any judgments, any assumptions from your perspective that are influencing the way that you may be able to relate with the other people? So
Well, because I don't live there, and I'm a former board member, I have known all of these people for over 40 years. I know that when we all moved there 40 years ago, that the condominium wasn't exactly what they wanted it to be. They were expecting something else, and it just wasn't that. And people had placed all of their savings into purchasing the condominium. So this woman and a lot of people are struggling with the fact that I'm still living here in this place and I can't move anyplace else. So I acknowledge that all the time during our meetings and point out that we've got to make the best of where we are, that we need to come together so that for those of us who want to leave, we're now in a situation where we can sell our condos for much 300% higher than what we purchased them for. So that's what I try to do.
So I wonder from their perspective, what is so important? I think it's something to do with stability or security. What's so important to them that's causing them to be so adamant about things?
I don't think it's security or stability, and anyone else is welcome to anyone else may chime in, but I believe to not be perceived as stupid, because look at what I did and look at where I am. I'm smarter than you think. So I know what's going on. Money was stolen. That's why our condo fees must be raised. We're not using all of this water. We're not using this much electricity. Now that's the way I perceive it. I'm going back 40 years because these are some of the same arguments we had 40 years ago.
So you think that they're needing more clarity around how things are being spent? You think that would help to support, maybe if there were like a clear line of the bills and everything? That's why they want to do the audit, right? For clarity's sake?
No, they want to do the audit because we haven't had one. And we had the bills presented. They were certified by our manager. Everything was right there in front of them. They just didn't believe it. It was not they, and when I say they, this individual and her followers, they did not believe it. I don't believe it. And so the manager says, this is a bill from Washington Gas. Well, when was it? And he says, look on the bill, you will see. How do we know this is a certified copy of the bill? But the fact of this audit, the audit is required by the bylaws. We have not had enough money to prepare an audit. And because we have funds in the reserves, we can use that money and we shouldn't have to raise the condo fee. That's where it keeps going back to.
Mm. How is that affecting you emotionally? Can you feel any emotions coming up? Let me go to the,
Just talking about it right now, my stomach is churning.
so your stomach, yeah, your stomach is churning. It's
Yeah.
kind of maybe a
Yeah.
tightness.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that when I moved away that I could get away, but I can't because I still own it and I still know these people. And
Mhm.
until I sell, this thing won't go away.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What about the emotions? Check on this wheel. What kind of emotions can you connect with?
Well, sad. I'm very sad.
Yeah.
I'm very sad because the property is a beautiful property and we had so many high hopes for it.
Mm.
And the woman about whom I'm speaking I don't know, was a very good friend. And I'm just so sad that, she's trying to pull us apart and not come together, in my opinion.
It sounds like there's a little bit of remorse there, or like a mourning of what could have been.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And maybe a little bit of despair, like, oh, this is this could have
And
been so
Barbara
great.
Clark is online. Barbara Clark knows the property I'm talking about. And years ago, a lot of the people who felt the same way she did actually went to the Washington Post. And many of my neighbors allowed the Post to photograph them. And we looked so silly because they were so angry about having purchased this property. And the same people are still there. So.
Can you connect with any feelings of anger, Kathy?
I was angry when I was on the board, but right now I don't. I'm not on the board any longer.
Mm-hmm.
I was very angry when I was on the board. I mean, people didn't want to talk to me because all I talked about what was going on in the condo.
Yeah. And going back
Mm.
to the needs, like I think what comes up for me as you're talking is like the need for efficiency and effectiveness of the time and the energy and the money that's being used at the level of the board. Is that
I
like
agree. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
You're like, why is this is just so silly? Why are you even talking about this? Right?
But underlying it also is the fact that a lot of people cannot afford the raise in the condo fee.
Mm.
And that's also very sad. And we can't afford, and what's going to happen, the reason the condo fee is raised so high is because there will be people who won't pay the condo fee, and we have to raise it higher to accommodate them. That's already worked into the raise. So that's extremely sad also.
Yeah, so wanting maybe some equality, but also understanding it needs to be equitable.
Yes, 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 indeed.
Hmm. So let's go to the request then. Is there a request that you can make of this group or with those considerations in
Oh,
mind?
let's see. A request which is issue oriented, a positive action, flexible, specific, compassionate, and it allows a no.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the sort of request
That's
I
the
have to
one.
make?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked at it that way. I have to look at that. I have to ponder that.
Yeah.
I have to ponder that.
What about asking with the attention to the efficiency and effectiveness, right? Of the time and money of the board or of the residents, right?
Yes.
Maybe you could ask them to consider alternative options before going into this this other option of having the audit, right? Maybe you could say, I think it's really important for us to be efficient um, and effective with the way that we're using our resources. And I wonder if there are alternative strategies that we could use to try to address the funding situation or the chance that there may be some money that isn't accounted for. So can we consider something, what other options there are before we decide on the audit would be the request.
Well, right now at the condominium, the other options were considered. The main option was a decrease in the use of utilities. Unfortunately, our condominium pays for all utilities, and we have many homeowners. There have been homeowners who've left their home to go to work. Oops, left the shower on, or they left the water running somewhere in the tub because they weren't considering, because they don't receive a water bill. The condominium receives the water bill. Water, the DC Water has been able to pinpoint those properties. So we know, and so we've asked people in terms of conservation of water, electricity, heat, and the conservation of trash.
So this would be to address the condo fees being so high,
Yes,
right?
that's yes.
So how do you reduce, what are some of the things that we can do? And that's one of them, right? So in
Yes.
consideration of the fact that we don't have enough money at this point in time, is it possible for us to reconsider what alternatives there are to reduce the fees outside of,
Yes.
yeah, instead of having to increase them?
Yes.
So yeah, so what I would recommend is for you to just sit with this and think about, you know, what are the main needs that you have? It seems like efficiency and effectiveness are two big ones, but then also the need for
A reduced condo fee so that our residents, our owners, can stay there.
right, a reduced condo
Yeah.
fee would be in the, I think it's just an awareness and consideration, right? Like consideration of
Yes.
the other people that are involved. Like you can't
Yes.
just raise the condo fee if you know that some of the people that live there aren't going to be able to pay it. Right? So
Exactly. And
we
that's
need
where
to
we are.
consider them. And so that I think that the request would incorporate that, like needing for consideration, needing for support, for the other people to feel supported, or at least like acknowledged for where they are.
Yes.
And so I
And it's
think,
very sad because there's a sense of greed, because many of these condos were originally purchased in the 70s. It's at mid 5 figures. And now, as you probably know, in the District of Columbia, they are worth now mid 6 figures. And there are owners who want to push out those persons who cannot afford the condo fee. And according to our bylaws, we can take them to court, make request their unit in lieu of their condo fee. And that's what a lot of owners wish to do. Very, very sad. Very sad.
yeah, that's gentrification at its greatest, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could call it that.
I wonder if so consideration is something that you're wanting them to connect with, the need for consideration of these other people that may not be able to afford it. But I also think like inclusion and belonging and cooperation are all big needs here too. Like needing to support each other, needing to
Yes.
kind of respect each other, and the other, you know, respect the ones that may not have the financial capacity to deal with the increase in fees, acknowledgement of that, and then their need for stability and safety and security in their home is probably coming up for them, for the people that
Yeah.
don't have the funds. That's got to
I
be pretty
think you
scary.
pinpointed it for me. you pinpointed it for me, going back to the request of streamlining it to the issue. What is the real issue here? Are we angry because we're still living here? Or are we angry because certain property owners are making it impossible for us to sell right now because we can't have upkeep on the units? So I think that's important. I need to say, what is the real issue here? You know,
Right.
so.
And then also speaking up about the fact that, how this increase is going to affect all the players. Realizing that, bringing that to the awareness to the table, be like, this is the impact of this decision. This is how it's going to affect certain members. And being very clear about that, and then creating a strategy to address that if you can. So whether that's having to support them in the increasing fees, right? Them not being able to pay it, so others having to pay it for them, or are there alternative strategies? Are there programs that can help them to pay for their condo fees? Is there kind of a, elderly
Right.
care, low income care, something like this that could come into play to help? Maybe there's grants or funding out there for, older buildings. So maybe there's alternative
Excellent point.
options.
That's an excellent point. Thank you, Lynn.
You're welcome. So when we dig into the needs, right? When we remove the strategy that you were originally connected with was like the condo fees being raised to address the fact that the house needs to be, or the building needs to be renovated or updated, upkept, right?
Yes, yes.
Strategy.
Just basically repaired. Yes.
But
Just
if we
basically
can
repairs. Yes.
we can dig into underneath of that main concern into what are the needs that are being met by this conflict? What are the things that come up for you and for the other people? Then it expands our potential or the possibilities that are available to us to think about, okay, well, maybe raising the condo fee isn't really the only choice in this situation, right? What other alternative options are there to meet our need for support and cooperation and consideration and mutuality, and having a house that's being repaired regularly and kept up to standards that are okay for me? So having that inclusion too of everyone involved. Thank you very much, Kathy. Is there anything else you want to share about
Thank
that?
you. Thank you. I'm fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so wonderful. Does anybody else want to share on an example that they were mulling over that we could work on a little bit together? So one last thing when we're talking about that request, we want to package it in a way that's as appealing as possible, right? So we can come into the conversation immediately saying exactly why we're excited about being in relationship with the other people that we're in conflict with. Why are we wanting to go back and restore this relationship, right? Why are we just not walking away from it? Maybe there's reasons that aren't because I prefer, but rather because I have to, right? We work together, we're on a board together in our condo building, we live, we own property together. But go revisit what's the reason behind the relationship to begin with, and then try to develop a way of bringing that to the table in a positive light with some gratitude, right? I'm really grateful for you to want to work with this on me, with me on this. I'm really, we have to be working alongside each other regularly, considering the circumstances, and it would be really wonderful if we could come to some understanding, mutual understanding, and I want to support you in the best way. I want to know what's coming up for you. I'm excited about learning about what's going on for you, and I also want to share how this is affecting me. And I think so then, like, using a sandwich method, you start out with something really positive about why you're in the relationship to begin with, then you make that request, you talk about my feelings, my needs, and this is what I would like for you to do differently, or what for us to do differently. And then you say at the end of it, okay, well, if we're able to be effective and actually like do these things that we're promising or that we're talking about doing, then this is going to be the outcome. This is how it's going to benefit our relationship. These are the things that could come from it that can strengthen the network we're a part of. And so opening up with why you're grateful to be in the relationship and closing with how the change that you're asking to come about is going to improve the relationship and strengthen the network that you're a part of. Along with the being flexible, being positive, being specific, and then being willing and able to accept the no and having the other requests available to you. If they're not willing to do it, come right out with another ask. What else could they do that possibly could support this relationship and the collaboration that you're in that may not require as much of an investment on their part, but would be possible for them, reasonable for them to do? Okay. So now I want to talk a little bit about, we're about 30 minutes out of finishing, so we don't have much longer together. But I want to talk a little bit about how conflict can be really constructive and supportive of developing healthy interdependent systems that allow people to show up as themselves authentically so that they can truly be happy without compromising their needs. And how it also, conflict can be destructive and can break down relationships and kind of undermine growth and reduce the ability for systems to be strong and isolate individuals, right? So there are different things that we can do to make conflict constructive and make it destructive. When we're constructive in our conflict, we're presenting reasonable evidence and support of those evidence and ideas around those things that can be presented reasonably to the others to show, like, this is actually, let me lay it out for you. These are the things that are happening right now. Versus emotional arguments where you're insisting the other person should listen to you because of your experience or your credentials, right? We want to be really clear. We want to level the playing field. We want to just present things as they are without the judgments, the accusations, the assumptions, without the emotions. We can also take a position of curiosity and compassion for the other situation by asking a lot of questions, being there supportive with them, talking them through whatever it is they're experiencing, rather than making accusations and assumptions and acting defensively about the things that they are doing and saying. We can also accepting questions. We can also accept questions and criticisms of your ideas as beneficial feedback, right? When they criticize you or whatever you're presenting, you can say, oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, I need to consider that more, how that's affecting you. Rather than treating it like it's a personal attack. A lot of times when someone makes a criticism about what we're doing, we take it personally and we immediately get defensive. We want to move away from defensiveness. We want to be more open. We want to be more optimistic and give them the benefit of the doubt. Because we don't know their intentions. We can't get into their head. We don't know exactly what's going on for them. Their defensiveness or the way that they're behaving towards you could have nothing to do with you, and usually it doesn't, right? So we want to be able to kind of move ourselves out of that situation of where we're thinking everything that they're doing is because of us. It's not. Most of the time, it's not. So protecting our, building up that desensitivity so that we move from a place of reactivity to a place of thoughtful response. We can listen closely to the other person rather than rejecting their viewpoints without completely understanding what they're talking about. So be open, ask questions, ask for evidence to support what they're saying if they're saying things that don't make sense to you, rather than just rejecting it. We don't want to mock or ridicule anyone if we're in a respectful adult relationship, right? It happens sometimes. We do it. Sometimes I'll leave a message from somebody, one of my friends, and I'll be like, oh, nope, I got to erase that before I send it because I know I was just not behaving in a way that is respectful. So we want to make sure that we're being respectful. We're not ridiculing the others. And we want to build on the other's ideas and perspective and suggestions to interweave their perspective with ours so that we can, it's like a collaboration. How do we come together and resolve this together? By disagreeing, in order to find the best solution, we actually uncover what our wants and needs are, and we're able to present them to the other person, right? This doesn't work for me. But we don't want to disagree just to fight with the other person. We want to really consider what they're offering and see how it will benefit us, how it won't benefit us, and then be able to really clearly articulate that to them from like a place of compassion. We want to be flexible in the way that we believe, what we're experiencing. We want to be flexible in the things that we're presenting to them, or the stance that we have on the situation. Be willing to change our minds. We don't want to ignore or refuse to reconsider a position. We want to be able to grow with them, right? By gaining insight into their experience, they're sharing something with us, their vulnerabilities and their experience as well. And then we can incorporate that with our understanding, what should change the way that we perceive the situation. Last but not least, we don't want to ignore or dismiss the other person's needs. We want to be aware of them. We want to uncover them. We want to help to support them so that we can incorporate them with our needs and together work to find a solution that addresses the needs of everyone involved. So now I want to talk a little bit about bias and power dynamics, because these are definitely influencing us in our world. And a lot of times we're in positions of power and we don't realize how it's influencing the ways that other people are perceiving us, or that the access that they have to certain resources. And in some cases, the biases that we have are not conscious. And we want to bring that more to our awareness too, because that's going to affect how the power dynamics play out. So before we get into bias, different types of biases, I want to talk about different types of perspective and how they influence us to cause us to have a bias. We have different types of observations, right? We have an internal and external observation. External observation is how we observe the world around us, outside of ourselves. So literally like the placement in the room and how it's influencing what I'm exposed to. So how where I sit in the room is going to influence what I can see, what I can hear. I was in a class today and I was teaching, and I used the example of one of the students not being able to read what was happening on the projector because they were sitting in the back of the class. I was in the front of the class and I had no trouble reading it. So simply because I was in the front of the class, I had access to information that they did not. And so that's the type of observation we would consider an external observation. Internal observations are ones that are influenced by our internal experience, our world inside of us. And that could be, simply the mood that we have that day, to our culture, to our traumas, to our insecurities, to our society. All of these things influence the way that we observe the world from our internal perspective. And then last but not least, there's systematic observations, or being able to see how the systems that we're a part of are affecting our observations. And an example of this would be the prejudice that we found in the issue of bias with the medical field towards minorities during the pandemic, right? There was evidential support to show that certain groups in the United States, if not around the world, right? Certain countries were not getting the vaccine. And it was because they were low-income countries, predominantly dark-skinned individuals, right? We could measure that, we could quantify that. And those, the systems that we're a part of, were creating those biases. And so we need to be aware of how the systems that we're a part of are influencing our world and how they're affecting our ability to access different resources. And our biases, whether they're conscious or unconscious, implicit bias is usually unconscious bias. It encompasses both favorable and unfavorable assessments of the world around us, and oftentimes is part part of our unconscious mind. We're not aware of the biases that are coming up for us. And oftentimes it's not accessible through introspection. So when we reflect back on the situation at hand, we can't even see the bias that we had. These implicit biases often lead to feelings of or attitudes of about other people based on physical characteristics like race, ethnicity, age, and appearance. And these implicit biases, or biases generally speaking, develop over a lifetime, beginning at the early ages, just being born, till 3 years old, when we're developing our core values. And then those biases continue to build throughout our life, depending on and based on the exposure of messages that we receive from the people around us and the world around us, the systems we're a part of. And these biases that we have, whether they're conscious or unconscious, can be brought to the world through prejudice, through stereotype, and can manifest as microaggressions. Microaggressions are verbal or behavioral or environmental slights that are results of individuals' biases. A microaggression at the systematic level, for example, could be no access to fresh produce, food deserts, right? That's a form of a microaggression. It's the system saying, you know what, we don't respect and value you enough as an individual because we're prejudiced and stereotyping against you. And so we're not going to allow, or we're not going to support providing essential nutrients that you need in areas where you live. And these microaggressions, whether they're intentional or unintentional, occur often, and they communicate hostility, derogatory or negative viewpoints, and it perpetuates a worldview of oppressive culture. So really bringing our awareness to these judgments, to these biases, to these prejudices, and more so how we're bringing that into the world through our microaggressions, or how the microaggressions around us are affecting the people around us, bringing that into light to our consciousness, to becoming aware of it, is very important for us to be able to start to address the needs that people have. Because when we're biased against someone, or when we're ignorant to how they're experiencing the world and how it compares to the way we experience it, we can't put ourselves in their shoes, which makes it difficult for us to be able to connect with them. When we're going into these relationships with people, these collaborations with people, one of the reasons why we get into conflict is because we can't relate to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can start to build bridges of relationship by trying to understand how these biases are affecting them and how it's affecting us differently, then that'll open up to our awareness, our ability to see how we're different, and start to help to bridge a connection between us, where we're starting to be aware of how their needs differ from ours.
Excellent.
I want to talk a little bit about power dynamics. We've got about 15 minutes or so left. This is really important for me because this is kind of the reason why I do everything that I do. This is the reason why nonviolent communication is so powerful, because it levels the playing field. It brings people together, and it allows people to support each other to meet their needs. We're not ignoring the needs of the other people. We're not taking away what they have to meet our needs, but we're acknowledging the needs that they have, and we're trying to come together to meet our needs together. So it's not a power over situation, it's power with. When we're in a power over situation, this is usually how power is understood. This type of power is built on force, coercion, domination, and control, and is motivated largely through fear, right? We want to scare people into a place where they're not able to behave the way that they would typically behave, because they're in that place of survival, right? And they're not thinking clearly, and then we can take advantage of them. We want to move out of this place of domination in most cases, right? And we want to be able to work together and empower each other. Starhawk argues that force, which enables one individual or group to make decisions affecting others and to take control, ultimately backs power over. It may rule with weapons that are physical or by controlling the resources we need to live. Money, food, medical care, or by controlling more subtle resources like information, approval, and love. We are so accustomed to power over, so steeped in its language and its implicit threats that we often become aware of its functioning only when we see its extreme manifestations. So the microaggressions are an indication of a power over at play. And by identifying those microaggressions, which are a manifestation of our biases, we can be aware of the power over systems, and we can work towards being more equal or equitable in our power distribution or dynamics, and move to power with systems. Power with systems is where we share power that grows out of collaboration and relationship. It's built on respect, mutual support, shared power, solidarity, influence, empowerment, and collaborative decision-making. Power with is linked to social power, the influence we wield among equals. Power with can help build bridges within groups or across differences. Rather than domination and control, power with leads to collaborative action and the ability to act together. The only way that power over works is if we can teach the other people or force the other people to not pay attention to the needs that they have. Because in power over systems, we want to dominate them, take their resources and stop them from being able to meet their needs, because from a scarcity mentality, we think that they're not able to meet their needs and we are able to meet ours too, or it's too complicated, it takes too much work, right? So it's much easier just to take what they have. If we can move to this collaborative, collective action power with system, it allows everyone to be aware of their needs. It allows everybody to meet their needs. It allows everybody to get to that place of transcendence and creativity and flow. And that's the only way you get there, right? If you can meet your needs. So when we're in power over systems, we're not letting people meet their needs and they're never going to be happy. They're pretty much enslaved to the system they're a part of. When we're in power with, they're aware of their needs. They're able to stand up for them without repercussion. They can say no when there's a request made. And they can protect and support themselves in from a place of independence. As we move from a place of dependency on other people fulfilling our needs, to a place of interdependency where we're working together in these systems to fulfill each other's needs, we gain our capacity for complex situations, and we become more fair, more equal in the distribution of resources. Everything becomes more mutual. As individuals, human beings, we're going to flow across this chart regularly. We're going to go from a place of being independency or independent, the center box, where we acknowledge our needs, we can meet those needs using various resources. We're not attached to any particular strategy. We can take responsibility for our feelings. We understand those feelings are because we need something. And we can sometimes fall back onto the dependency where we're depending on other people to meet our needs. From this place where we're depending on other people, we're attached to or dependent on those other people to meet those needs. The things and strategies that we use to meet those needs are also something that we're attached to. We don't realize that there are a variety of other ways that we can meet our needs. And from a place of dependency where we're relying on other people, we oftentimes don't take responsibility for our feelings. And we blame and shame the other people for whatever it is that they're doing to try to get them to give us what they're giving us so we can meet our needs. Dependency is actually where we're at when we're in a power over system, because we're requiring the other people to sacrifice something so that we can fulfill the things that we fulfill. This is the least healthy of the three, right? It's the least empowered. It's the least, we're not flourishing in this situation. We're just meeting our needs, and we're doing it in a way that requires other people to support us. When we're independency or independent, we're acknowledging the needs that we have. We're able to be responsible for our feelings. And then when we move from that place of independency into interdependency, where we're working within a system, we're able to help support other people meet their needs. Other people can help to support meeting our needs. We're always able to fall back on that independency, knowing that we have the ability to meet our needs on our own if we need to. So we're not attached to any particular person or strategy, but rather we're free to move gracefully, carefully from one strategy to another to be able to meet our needs. Okay, Sue, you're not able to meet me for coffee today and fill my need for connection. I'm going to call my other friend, Jan, and we're going to take a walk in the park, and my need for connection will be met. Sue is not the only way I can meet that need for connection. And I realize that, I'm aware of that. And so when Sue says no, I don't get upset. I'm not freaking out because I know I can resource myself another way to meet that need. So I realize my needs can be met using various resources and falling back to that place of independence. I'm not attached to any particular strategy. I can flow easily between different strategies to meet my needs. I'm highly aware of how I impact others and how others are impacting me. And I can clearly and effectively request support when meeting my needs using the resources that are appropriate to do so. So we want to work to this place of interdependency, but we want to be able to move freely back to independency, because interdependency is also relying on others. And we want them to voluntarily be in collaboration with us. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Because I know I have just 2 more slides of kind of closing remarks. Got to bring everything together. Okay, so when we're in an uneven power situation, when there's power over, or where the dynamics are not necessarily mutual and fair, we want to move through these systems demonstrating respect from a place of curiosity with compassion. And we want to have a goal of building trust and accountability. Accountability is key. To build accountability, just going to slide to this slide really quickly. We can move from blame into accountability by doing several different things to support us. One of the ways is to make sure that we're not overwhelmed by our emotions, because when we're in that place of being overwhelmed, we're defensive automatically, naturally speaking, right? We're trying to protect ourselves, our resources, our needs. And so we're oftentimes going to use blame as a tool to help to protect us. We don't want to blame the other person. We want to take responsibility. So settle ourselves. Find the groundedness, balance that we need. Don't let the emotions interfere. Take a moment if you need to. Take a step away if you need to. But come back to the conversation from a place of being settled, so that you can be really clear and take responsibility and be accountable for what's going on, and you're part of this conflict. Lead with the 6 C's: careful consideration of conditions, with curiosity, commitment to evidence, and compassion. So it's just slowly, carefully, supportively, compassionately, curiously moving through the process of connecting with the other person. Don't assume all the facts. Try to be sincere. Sincerely want to learn about what's going on for them, what's going on in the situation, how their understanding of the situation may differ from yours. Try not to be provoked. And, from this place of compassion, you're less likely to be provoked into being defensive. Make a commitment to evidence and systems thinking, where you're thinking not only about yourself, but you're thinking about the others involved. Try to understand what conditions were present for you and for them. Try to observe clearly what was happening with the others from the other's perspective. And then just take your time and carefully, thoroughly work through that process. To move into accountability from blame, we want to, not take on all of the criticisms or feedback as character flaws. We want to realize that, we all make mistakes as human, and this is a learning opportunity for everyone involved. We can come together in collaboration and learn from the experience, and from there, realize, okay, from a growth mindset, how this is helping you. This conflict is improving how you're working your way through the world. Try to focus on the problem and the solution and not the person. It's not the person that's the problem, but it's something to do with the relationship. And that is something that you can work on. You can't change the person, but you can change the dynamics of the relationship. Look for breakdowns in the process. Look for flaws in the system. See how the environment that you're a part of is influencing how you're communicating. We tend to assume that the problems are caused by, we tend to assume that the cause of the problems happened right before and in the same vicinity of where the problem occurred. But sometimes there's a long history that's influencing it. So think about the situation at hand, but also think about all of these other contributing factors that could be influencing you and the other person and has led you to having a conflict. And then also, basically take on responsibility. Take on the accountability of your contribution to the situation. How did you contribute? How did your actions affect the situation? How did your judgments, your assumptions affect the situation? So take responsibility, build trust, try to come from a place of curiosity and compassion, demonstrate respect. Share why the relationship is important, express the needs that you have, acknowledge the judgments, the biases, the insecurities, name the feelings if it's appropriate. It's not always appropriate, but that vulnerability can build trust and foster compassion by saying about, the emotions that you're experiencing, the physical sensations you're experiencing. Name the things that you recommend for moving forward. What are the strategies? What are the requests that you can make? Realize the other person may have different perspective and invite them. Remember, every no is not necessarily a no that this collaboration won't work. It means that no, this request or this strategy isn't suitable, and there's probably another need that hasn't been recognized that needs to be brought up. So see the no as an invitation for more exploration of what's coming up for you or what's coming up for them. What needs are underlying that no. Think about where you are in the relationship with respect to the power dynamics. Think about whether or not you want to take a dominant or submissive position, whether or not you want to have a mindset of a collaborative mindset or an assertive mindset. Because we can choose going into the conversations whether or not we want to be very specific and assertive about something. And if we are, what are the repercussions of the boundaries that we want to put into place? That will, if they're not able to follow through with the thing I'm asking, what is the next step? Because sometimes we need to be demanding. Sometimes we need to be assertive. Is the request appropriate, or do we need to put some really clear boundaries here? Do I need to be the dominant person? And how can I go in there with confidence that these are the demands that I'm making and these are the reasons why, and get them to realize how important it is to you so that it turns from being a demand into something that they see as a request and they're willing to do? Can you transform that situation? And then last but not least, where are we empowering ourselves? And then can we empower ourselves without compromising the other person and their needs and their freedoms? And that leads us to a place of nurturance, right? Because we're supporting them in meeting their needs, and we're also protecting our own. And some final conclusions. Consider the needs of the group. Consider each of the needs of the individuals. And as a leader, be considerate of the needs of the group as being the most important, but keep the other needs in mind and create strategies that can incorporate all of those needs. It's possible. You just have to be very creative and take time and really work the conversation. So we can use NVC, active listening, and self-regulating tools and techniques while moving from blame and judgment to accountability to resolve conflict. It's possible. All of these strategies are really helpful. And I think that you're going to find once you start practicing them that they're going to be very effective. One caveat to all of this is that if you want to go into collaboration, relationship with another person, you want to resolve conflict with another person, the other person or people need to be invested in that relationship, and they need to be willing to work on coming up with a solution with you. If they're not willing to do that, then there's no chance of resolving the conflict. We want to try to move away from an attachment to strategies and uncover underneath of the strategies what are the underlying needs. That'll help us to develop a stronger solution that'll actually address what's causing the conflict to begin with. Consider the dominant and submissive behavior that I mentioned earlier so that we can empower ourselves in negotiation. Every relationship we're in is a negotiation to meet needs. How can we be really strategic in how we're going through that process of meeting those needs in those relationships? Every healthy interdependent system, each individual has a time when they're dominant and a time when they're submissive. Be able to fluctuate back and forth, realize when it's best for you to be dominant, realize when it's best for you to be submissive, and be able to work with the others to try to flow with them. Because when they see that you're able to be submissive and they're able to take the dominant place, then they feel empowered. And that shows that mutuality that we're working on, that fairness, that equality that we're trying to find. And that'll harvest, beneath of that, we'll cultivate respect, and it'll support that relationship being able to move forward. And just a few last points. When we're going from codependency to independence to interdependency, remember that there are multiple strategies that we can use and find out what strategies are available to us to be able to meet those needs so that we can flow easily from independence to interdependency. And we only have to fall back on codependency sometimes, right? We want to be able to meet our needs on our own. We want to be able to go into these systems and work with other people to meet our needs together. And we want to be able to flow back and forth from them freely because we don't know when these systems are going to break down and when we're going to have to do it on our own. Considering multiple outcomes and prepare our body and mind for the no is really important for the somatic aspect of this whole process. So when we're considering how they might respond, we think about alternative requests that we can make to address the conflict at hand. We want to prepare ourselves for hearing a no to all of the requests because it'll put us in a position where we've already gone through it somatically. We don't have that nervous system response. We are afraid of the no, and we can feel empowered because we have a variety of other ways we're going to meet our needs, prepared and ready to go. And we know we're going to be able to do those too. So just consider the no and consider how it feels in your body. Last but not least, realizing that behavior is hard to change. Forgiveness and acceptance are a big part of this work, and that we're imperfectly human. And that's one of the beautiful parts of this life experience, is being able to fail and learn from it and rebuild stronger. And if we can rebuild stronger with the others, it's even more complex and beautiful, elegant, I guess I could say. So some closing quotes. Martin Luther King said from his book on his article on strength to love, "He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love, the power of love, excuse me." Alexander Pope said, "To err is human, to forgive is divine." And last year at the inauguration ceremony, Amanda Gorman, from her beautiful poem, "The Hills We Climb," "When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms and we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it." Some references. I'll send these slides around so you guys can have a copy of them if you'd like.
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. We tend to we'll
Please.
upload the presentation up onto our YouTube channel for everyone. And
I
think
would like to get a copy of the slides, though.
okay,
You've got it, Ulysses. No problem. Nice
Thank
to see
you.
all right. Ulysses, you can download them from our YouTube channel, but that's okay.
Wait, I can actually download the slides and not the entire presentation from the YouTube channel?
Oh no, you would have to download the whole YouTube. Well, no, I don't. I'll have to check on that because I think you can download it as an MP4 file, but you can also download it as a. I'll check. But anyway,
Well,
we'll get the slides to you.
If Miss
We'll get the
King
slides to
is well, all right. Thank you.
you. We'll get those to you.
you. You know
No
what we
problem.
Gail, you know what we could do if you want is I could add a link that goes to like a Dropbox where people could, in the comments of the YouTube channel where they could just click on it and if it doesn't work the way that you mentioned it.
Well, we can send it around to the folks. We'll put it on YouTube and we'll try to figure out how that works on our end. But if you don't mind, that would be great. I just want to thank everyone for attending. I want to thank Leanne for all of her
Yes.
hard work today. And I'm just going to say in closing, I took notes, but here are some of the things that I took away from this session. The first one that I took away was thoughtful response. So I thought that was really cool to catch myself that there are times when I have to respond a little bit better. I love that conflict is due to an inability to relate. I think that says mountains. I love leading with compassion. And I love that it's not the person, it's the relationship. So I always like that.
Yes.
So those are my takeaways, and hopefully everyone else who came today has their own set of takeaways for this. But I'll open it up. It is late. I know it's 2 hours. Normally we only do about an hour and a half. So I know everyone who's sort of stayed on, I appreciate that. But I'll open it up for just a few minutes, if you don't mind, for some questions. You should be able to unmute yourself. And if Leanne doesn't mind hanging around for a few more minutes, if anyone has any questions, let's do it.
Well, okay. The one question that I had, and you came back to this, Ms. King, at the end, because what concerned me about the entire presentation is I recognized that everybody had to. This is high concept stuff in that everybody has to be committed to working it out. And at the conclusion, when you said that everybody has to be committed to the relation, I mean, it's not going to work if everybody isn't committed to the relationship. And so my question is, and I know it's an open-ended one, and there may not be an actual an answer for this, but if you're in a conflict with somebody and you want to resolve it and you're trying to be thoughtful about it, but the other person isn't invested in the relationship, what do you do?
Thank you, Commissioner Campbell. It's a great question and it's a complex one. Like you said, there are a lot of answers. What I would recommend is for you to do the work independently without expecting anything from them because they're not willing to give it at this point, right?
Mhm.
And by going through the process of understanding what your needs are and then possibly postulating on what needs that they're yearning for are, what are the needs that are putting them in a place of feeling like they need to protect themselves, and try to understand insecurities that they may have. Try to understand how their assumptions or judgments could be influencing the way that they're perceiving the world. And then if you're still having to be around them, right? Because if it were a relationship where another person wasn't invested, but you don't have to be around them, then they would just disappear from your consciousness, right? You wouldn't have to be around them anymore. But if it's somebody at work or somebody, like you have to be around them regularly, but they don't want to resolve the conflict, then just do your best to continue to do what you do without interfering with them, but demonstrate all of the things that we talked about. Demonstrate respect, demonstrate that you're compassionate towards them, demonstrate from a distance that you're interested in supporting them to meet their needs. And by, a lot of the stuff that we do, the messages that we receive from people, from others, are nonverbal. So if they see you doing these things with the intention of trying to build a bridge, then over time there's a chance that they may start to open up and become more vulnerable, start to wanting to trust you again, start wanting to have some kind of relationship with you. So the only thing that you can do in that situation is from a distance, and the only thing that you can do is change yourself.
Thank you.
Excellent.
All right. Well, I don't know if we have any other questions. Thank you, Commissioner Campbell.
Yep. Excellent question.
All right. Well, again, I just want to thank Leanne for leading this session tonight. As I said, I've got my takeaways, and so hopefully everyone else was able to jot down theirs. Appreciate everything. And thank you, commissioners, for logging on. I know probably for many of you it's been a long day, as it is for us. So again, thanks very much. And you can pass it on that we will put this up on our YouTube, and we will get the slides out as well. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much, Leanne. Thank you for everything.
It's a
Excellent
pleasure.
presentation.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Quite so much in it.
And feel free to email me if you have any more questions or if things come up for you. I'll ask Gail to maybe add my contact with the slides and the presentation.
Yeah, no, that would be great. That would be amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good night.
Thank you, commissioners, for being here. Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, all. Good night.